Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting to order at 9 o'clock. Emergent changes to the agenda. The recommendation that the August 2nd, 2024 special board meeting agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Any emergent changes to the agenda? Oh, can I get someone to make that motion, please? Clara, Trustee Yegas. Thank you. All right, seeing none, I'll just call for any opposed. Okay, passed. Declaration of conflict of interest, that the Board of Trustees declare if they have any conflicts of interest related to agenda items from the August 2nd, 2024 special board meeting, and if so, should declare them. Any conflicts? Can I get someone to make that motion, please? Trustee Long, thank you. Seeing no conflicts, carried. Action item, moving on to D, our board policy 24. In response to motion 22-223, the Board of Trustees moved to designate a meeting to develop a policy limiting personal communication devices in the classroom. The recent announcement from the Minister Dimitris Nicolaides and the ministerial order 014 of 2024, the board will discuss the newly developed board policy 24, personal mobile devices, social media in schools for the Board of Trustees approval. The recommendation on the floor is that the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of the board policy 24, personal mobile devices and social media in schools as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Poitras? Thank you. Trustee Poitras, would you like to speak to it? Can't hear you, Trustee Poitras.
Is that better? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that it is Friday of the long weekend and that we have a lot going on on our personal lives. But as we move forward with this ministerial order and doing what's best for our students, especially our students' health, mental health, I am just really appreciate that the board is here today to get the first reading of our policy out there. This allows our administration to share this first reading of our policy as they go forward talking to admin so that they can get feedback on it from admin. We can begin talking about it. It can be shared in the media by any different papers that decide to pick it up, and that first reading will really generate some conversation around this move that's happening, so that when we to be back in the schools, that those conversations that we have before moving forward with the second and third reading and getting feedback from our stakeholders can really be fulsome and not kind of last minute. So I appreciate being here and trying to get this policy into a first reading so that we can really start to discuss it with our constituents and allow our administration to use it to direct their work with admin procedure and what's moving forward in the school fall. So I just ask that everyone, I know we've all had time to look over it, so I ask that everyone, bring up our questions and concerns now for our first reading, and that we can hopefully get this passed today as a first reading.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. The floor is open. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Trustee Toon and then Trustee Long.
Yeah, I just want to thank Superintendent Segan for the work that went into this. I know it's a busy time and there's been a kind of a whirlwind since the minister's announcement and we first had this come forward, but it's amazing to see what's come forward in such a short amount of time. The only change that I would ask be amended is in 4.1, and that we remove classroom pouches from that the school plan. and leave it only inclusive of lockers. I know that the one of the things that I've heard in the short amount of time that this has been out here from parents, that they really are looking for consistency, and I think the lockers plan for storage is a lot more consistent than having that
Thank
distraction
you.
in the classroom. That fully removing it helps keep that consistency of having them stored in the lockers when they're not for those purposes. So that would be the amendment that I'd put forward for the board to consider.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. And so, Trustee Toon, so you have a motion on the floor for the amendment to just strike out, what does it say here? Classroom pouches from 4.1.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we will just be speaking to the amendment on the floor. Trustee Long, were you still going to be able to speak to the amendment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I had exactly the same thoughts as Trustee Toon. I thought 4.1 should read, shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during class time, shall store personal mobile devices in their lockers unless limited use is required. And I think that just makes things straightforward. There doesn't have to be any school plans. They keep them in their lockers. To me, that seems quite simple and straightforward.
Awesome. Thank you, Trustee Long. Was there any other, Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment behind this. I definitely think that this is something we're going to hear about when we discuss this with our constituents and get input from it. However, I do feel like as an overarching role of governance, based on what the minister has said for that grade 10, 11, and 12, there is the opportunity in there for personal devices to possibly be used by certain teachers at certain time with administrator approval. And so that's why I think the sentiment of that 4.1 is their personal device should not be on them in a classroom and should be stored according to the school plan, as every school will be able to develop their own plan as far as storage goes. If an individual school has decided that they will never ever be using a personal device or so I think that it says pouches in there specifically just as an example, whatever the schools decide. But I think that that's something that we, in my mind, are going to allow the administrators of the school to make those decisions and have their own plan as far as storage goes and things like that. So unless, like Greg said, we're going to move to they have to be in their locker, or they have to be not on school property, or they have to be, I believe that at that high school level, in my mind, not that we had decided anything, but in my mind, I thought at the high school level, administrators were going to be able to have that flexibility to look at the policy, then look at the admin procedure and make their plans based on that, which is why I would vote against this amendment until we hear from our admin and some of our stakeholders if the admin really feel like we want it to be the same. We want you guys to make this decision. In my mind, something quite that specific feels like it's not governance. It would be either in the admin procedure or done at the school level.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Trustee Charchin?
Thank you. Although I agree with Trustee Long and Trustee Toon that it would be nice and tidy to be able to just say they need to be kept in your locker, I also queried what you just spoke about, Trustee Poitras, and wondering that would not be convenient if they do need to have the devices in the classroom because they've got permission to use them. Then they're breaking the protocol or the routine, not protocol, the routine of leaving them in the locker. I'm just wondering if Superintendent Seguin might be able to let us know if he's heard anything from administrators on that. And also agree with you, Trustee Poitras, on this is the first reading. We could get some feedback on that to make that change a little later. So if Trustee Seguin has anything I'd like to hear, or I'm sure we'd all like to hear. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Turchin. Daryl?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. You know, I haven't sent this final version out to administrators yet, of course, because I'm waiting for the board to finalize the board policy, and then we'll reflect that in administrative procedures. But we do know that in some classes, teachers have adjusted to kids bringing their personal mobile devices with them presently. And that's at all grades. And so they'll often be teaching and then just turn to the kids and say, hey, look this up or look that up. So having the access to them in class is helpful that way. However, this change, you know, will most likely result in teachers reflecting on their instructional strategies and their approaches, and then altering them, you know, to meet the board policy and admin procedure. I think in our earlier discussions as a board and senior admin, we felt that, you know, the personal mobile device use of K-9 really isn't maybe as much of a priority. We do have laptops and Chromebooks and things like that the kids can use when it's more purposeful and embedded into the instructional strategy and the lesson that day. High school, yeah, I think whatever decision the board makes, I think is okay. And then we'll put that out there to administrators and get their feedback. And that's why it will come back for a second and third reading based on that feedback, whether we need to adjust it or not. As some of you are former administrators and many of you have had kids, of course, in the system, you know that once they get to those high school courses, there's a little more independence and research associated with some of the topics that they're studying. Sometimes the kids have access to the Chromebooks and laptops, but not always. And so they often use their personal devices for that too. Yeah, but I can't really say for sure what specific feedback has come from administrators because I just haven't presented it to them as a whole yet.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. Trustee Long?
Yeah, I don't think we should leave it wide open like that. It is just first reading. There's likely to be changes. I would like to see us show leadership, make a decision. This is our first thoughts on it. Leave them in the lockers, and that gives administration, then they'll discuss that. That'll give them some meat to deal with. Having different policies at different schools and division would probably not be good. Somebody says, well, Matthew Halton has it this way, and CCHS parents are complaining because the way we have it. I think we need to make a decisive decision, and it is only first reading, and we put something solid there, and then administration and ourselves can work from there.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Trustee Yeages?
I was wondering why on the students grade K-9 and then number 4, students 10 to 12, why they're so specific for the students 10 to 12, but not for K-9. They say, according to the school plan, unless limited use. But then this one, you say, according to the school plan, and then say where. I really believe that it should be left up to the administrators where they want them to keep the cell phones. I think you're being very prescriptive to the older students, whereas you're not for the younger ones, and that's why I disagree with the changes. I would like to see both of those the same.
Thank you, Trustee Yeages. Mr. Seguin?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Yeagos. I think that's a really good point to to have whatever is in that 3.1 and 4.1 be consistent. I think the difference with this version here in 4.1 is the acknowledgement that at the time, the understanding at the time that high school kids might have more flexibility to bring the device to the classroom just for ease of use. If it's pertaining to their lesson or something comes up during a lesson, it's easier for the teacher even to say, okay, you can grab your cell phones from the front of the classroom here where we've got them gathered, rather than go back to your lockers to use them, where the board had felt very strongly in our earlier conversations around students K-9 not really needing them at all, unless there's a medical reason or other diagnosed health condition and stuff like that that would require it. So I think that's why the flexibility was built in and some examples provided in 4.1. But again, I think that if we're looking at altering 4.1 to be more like 3.1, then we just should be consistent with that for sure, if possible. And I guess while I've got the mic as well, I appreciate the thought of the trustees here that have been expressed around some consistency across the jurisdiction. As you know, we kind of have 8 distinct communities, different schools in those communities, and to have some consistent practices across the division could be beneficial for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. Trustee Toon, did you still have your hand up from before, or did you have another?
Nope, it's a brand new hand.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you went down in the back. Okay, so we have Trustee Toon and then Trustee Poitras.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Trustee Long. I think that consistency can really help the best practices. It's onerous on administration to do an individual plan per school. That takes a lot of time to engage with parents and staff members, and there's a lot of things going on, and we're looking at a short time frame to kind of implement this. I do think this is governance. If we can say that we allow it, we can say that we don't allow it. And one of the things with the minister putting this out, that's the minimum standard, and I don't think that we should be at the minimum. I think we should go farther in supporting our students and our staff. I think it's easy to say bring your cell phones to class today. Students, we're going to have a project, bring them for tomorrow if you have them. If they're sitting in the corner of a classroom in a pouch, I think they'll be relied on a lot more, and it'll still be a distraction. When we toured a school recently, there was a classroom, 2 classrooms opposing each other, and one had a no bell to bell cell phone sign on the door, and the one across from it had no sign, and asked the students if they were allowed to use cell phones, and right across from each other they were allowed to use cell phones the entire time in a class, and one was from bell to bell there was limited access. They couldn't use it at all. So I think that inconsistency for students is hard when we want to create those best practices and good educational habits for our students, when we know that it's a distraction and can be harmful for their mental health and their well-being. So I'm all for this amendment of leaving them in the lockers and taking that distraction out of the classroom.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, I am very, I hope my kids aren't listening right now, although they'll hear it later, but I am all for going as strict as possible. If it was up to me, I would say no schools. There are some schools in the States that have actually built mini lockers outside of the school because their phones cannot come inside of the building. If it was up to me personally, I would say your phone cannot come past this front door. I think that is what would be best for our students, for their mental health. However, I also know that we don't have adequate devices in our schools as far as technology, as far as iPads, Chromebooks, that students can always have access to that to do their projects. So I like Clara said, it's more prescriptive with the younger kids, but that's because with 9 and under, it feels pretty clear if we go ahead with this policy that 9 and under shouldn't have their phones at all, like not at all at school, not at lunch, not whatever. So hearing from our superintendent that he hasn't been able to go out and talk to them yet, but that, you know, maybe having something across the division, hearing that he's not totally opposed to it and doesn't think it's a terrible idea. And as far as a first reading goes, that's a good place to start too. I think that I would be more in favor of this, making this amendment. However, Trustee Toon, if I'm correct, the amendment was just to remove the word classroom pouches. I don't know if Trustee Toon amended the amendment to say lockers, just instead of to school plan to say lockers, or if that was just a recommendation. But I feel I would be more inclined to change it rather than to say school plan than to say it's clear to Mr. Seguin now, and I'm sure that he'll reflect it in the admin procedure that pouches aren't supposed to be a thing. But if we're amending our policy to make sure that it's clear that we don't want them in the classroom, then I don't know that just removing that, because those are just examples. The actual thing reads as far or according to the school plan, period. So I guess that would be my concern with the amendment, is removing that word clear enough? And then we're kind of asking Mr. Seguin to take care of it as far as the admin procedure looking like that's clear in the admin procedure that shouldn't be there. So that would be my only concern with how it currently reads.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. I see Trustee Gimber, Long, and Yegus have their hands up too. Brad, Trustee Toon, just because Trustee Poitras asked a specific question to your amendment, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think the intent was there to do that. So if that makes it clearer to remove school plan and just say according store personal mobile device in the locker, and unless limited use is required for, like I get what Trustee Poitras is saying about giving those examples. The intent was to say it's stored in the locker and not have to develop a school plan or have pouches in the locker. That's kind of what I said in the opening. So I appreciate her bringing that forward to suggest to bring clarity, and I would put that forward as a change to strike that all out and not just the classroom pouches, because I don't think I think she's correct. I don't think just removing classroom pouches makes it unclear, especially around what we've been debating for this entire time.
Okay, thank you. So I just need to make sure that we have this clear as the motion has been amended. And so I just want to make sure that I have this correct. That it says, so shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the classroom time and shall still store personal mobile devices. And you want to strike out to the school plan, and you want to have the word locker in there unless limited use is required for. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Okay, so now we're still speaking to the amendment. We have Trustee Gimber.
Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this forward. I think that consistency across the division is very important. I'm in favor of the amendment when it comes to having devices in the classrooms. I don't think they should be there at all, period. If we need to have more division devices, what I'm going to say is that we shouldn't be relying on the students to provide internet access for projects. So if that's something we need to look at in the future, then that's something we need to look at in the future. We can't be depending on kids to have cell phones or access to computers on their own data plans to do projects. So I'm definitely in favor of this, and thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Trustee Gimber. Trustee Long?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to the students to have that distraction on them in the classroom. I really don't. I don't think that's fair to the students. We're creating something that's a habit that people literally have to use. And now we're asking you to keep it in your pocket, in your school bag. Don't bring it out. I don't think that's fair to the students at all. The cell phone should not be in the classroom. As to the usage of technology, teachers plan their lessons well ahead of time. A teacher knows if they're going to need the students use their cell phone for a lesson, and they can certainly let them know beforehand to bring their cell phones to class.
Thank you, Trustee Long. We now have Trustee Yegas.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back to what I meant between 3 and 4. I understand the what they were saying in terms of that number, that 3 is more prescriptive, but the way I read it, it isn't, because number 3 is saying that the school will make the plan for how they're about cell phones, where number 4 is being very prescriptive about where they are. I can understand what they're trying to say there, but on the other hand, I think it's the interpretation of the wording there. Because in number 3, you could say, yes, the school is making the plan, so each school could make a plan about what to do with their cell phones or their personal devices. Whereas I think number 4, they're saying they have to be in their lockers.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. Trustee Charchin?
Thank you. The teacher part of me never really goes away. And if I had a choice, we'd go back to when I was a kid and they didn't exist. So that's where I am personally. As a teacher, I think that we lose, if we take them out totally and maybe not have that access for teachers to use, we lose the opportunity as teachers around that forward thinking about using devices. And we restrict the students from the opportunity to model restraint and appropriate use of a device under the supervision of a teacher. So I'm just, that's another part that I kind of going back and forth, the digital citizenship and proper use and restraint, which I had never thought of before. So just throwing that in the pot too. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Charchin. Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, thanks, Trustee Turchin. I appreciate the sentiment of learning to use your restraint. However, I'm 40 this year, and it is difficult for me, and it's embarrassing to admit that in a public meeting that's being recorded, but it is difficult for me to set boundaries and abide by them with my cell phone because of the addictive nature and the culture that we've built around cell phones. So I left the house and turned around and come back because I forgot my cell phone, even if I was only going to the store and back. So I think that not having them in the classroom might be the best way to start that separation. So I do think it is difficult, but I see your point, but I think removing them from the classroom might be the best, in my opinion, is the best option. I just wanted to check with the chair. So we just have one amendment, right? There's not been an amendment to the amendment. Okay. So I think that I appreciate what Trustee Yegas is saying. And so I would make an amendment to the amendment. And so the amendment currently reads that they're stored in their locker instead of according to school plan. I would amend that this is applied to both 4.1 and 3.1 to have that consistency. As our administrator said, it's good to have that consistency. So if we are going to reflect one. When Trustee Yeager said, why are they different? We heard our superintendent say, that's right, they could be the same, and I think that's a good idea. So I think that I would say, I am making an amendment to the amendment to apply this to both 4.1 and 3.1 for consistency and clarity, that they should be stored in lockers, unless, the teacher asks them to bring it for the next day, or these different scenarios. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Okay, so we have an amendment to the amendment, which is stating to reflect 4.1 and 3.1 be worded the same. And so we are just now going to be speaking to that amendment. And then if that passes, we'll go back to the regular amendment. And so we had Trustee Toon next. Trustee Toon, are you able to speak to the amendment that was just put on the floor?
I can. I was going to actually call the question on the amendment so we can
Oh,
get back to the main debate, because I think we've had great discussion on the amendment, but I think we're kind of going to full debate of the whole motion. But yeah, I will say that I support the amendment. I think that consistency is great, and it helps clarify as we go out to stakeholders to get feedback on that. Thank you.
thank you, Trustee Toon. Trustee Gimber? You're able to speak to the
Yep,
amendment?
I can. Yep. Because my sentiments fall in line with both of them, I'm definitely in favor of the amendment to the amendment and the amendment, and just want to reiterate that cell phones have no place in a classroom, and it's not fair to students who maybe can't afford them to rely on them for instructional purposes.
Thank you, Trustee Gimber. All right, if there's no other comments around the amendment that was just made, I will call the question. Again, I'm going to ask if there was any opposed. Trustee Poitras, as you made the amendment, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Okay, I'm going to ask if any are opposed.
Point
Sorry?
of order, could you please read the amendment to the amendment again?
So the amendment to the amendment is that 4.1 and 3.1 will read exactly the same. And so that being said, the amendment that was on the floor was that they shall not be in possession of personal mobile devices during class time and shall store personal mobile devices in the locker unless limited use is required for. Is that, I believe I got that. It's really hard because I don't have Nikki in front of me typing it all out. And so Lacey's got fireworks going. And so the amendment was that 3.1 and 4.1 will read exactly the same. Is everybody okay with that? The understanding is all clear from everybody? Okay, so we're ready to vote? Okay, I'm going to call if there's any opposed. Carried. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. So now we're back to the amendment, which is including the amended motion to it, which will then read, shall not be in possession of personal mobile devices during class time and shall store personal mobile devices in the locker unless limited use is required for, also including that 3.1 and 4.1 will read exactly the same. So we are just speaking to that now. I see Trustee Chartian has her hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Poitras, for your bravery and admitting where you are with cell phones. Again, I'm just going to go back to what I believe the role of a teacher is. When we're always teaching them lots of things about what happens outside the school and what happens outside the classroom. And I believe we know that in society, they're going to walk out the door and they're going to use them in whatever avenue and ways that they already do. I struggle with us losing the opportunity to help model appropriate use. I'm not sure, all kids have different experiences and different opportunities. I think we know that, and different influences in their life. And I just, it makes me nervous thinking about losing that opportunity to be able to provide that for them and preclude them from making those good choices in the classroom and outside. So I feel pretty passionate about that. So for that reason, really alone, I would vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Trustee Charchin. Trustee Poitras, I see your hand.
Yeah, I understand that, and maybe that's something I should be working on as well, or I constantly am, I guess. I don't think that having them store them in their locker really is, if we're going to have them store them at the front of the classroom in a pouch or in their locker, I think either way, it's physically being removed from their body. And so I think having teachers be able to say, we're going to use our cell phones. If you have one on Thursday, you can bring it then on Thursday they would be given that. However, I really and truly appreciate what Trustee Gimber is saying when you say that cell phones don't have a place in the classroom. I understand that teachers will, in the past, and have become accustomed to saying, pull out your phone, somebody look up definition of democracy, someone look up definition of communism, someone look up definition of melting pot, and we're getting those answers this way. However, we know that in our schools, if you have a device that you bring and it's using the Wi-Fi, it will come last in priority to every other school registered device that is on the Wi-Fi. So if you are a student who brings a cell phone that doesn't have data, it is almost useless to you. I've had a son who's taken a cell phone that isn't an actual cell phone, doesn't have a SIM card, and he can't even text me from it. He just ends up calling me from a school phone if he needs me, because it's basically useless. So not only are our teachers saying, you can bring a cell phone because we're going to use it for this project, but also that's a cell phone that's going to need data if you're using it with the internet, which is the whole purpose. We're talking about personal devices that can hook to the internet, not just cell phones, but smartwatches and everything. So I really agree with Trustee Gimber that there is a lot of pressure put on parents nowadays to make sure that their kid has a cell phone, make sure that that cell phone has access to the internet, because we use it in class, Mom. We need it in class, and I can't use the Wi-Fi. That doesn't really let me use it in the way that we need to. So I agree that we as a board, it feels like, based on this conversation, that we as a board really want to limit the use of cell phone in classrooms to a very minimal amount. And when we are using those, we need to remember what we're asking of parents. We're asking the parents, your kid is going to come home and say, I need a cell phone for class on Thursday. And if I take my cell phone that only has Wi-Fi, it's really not going to do the job. So that's a pressure that we shouldn't be putting on parents. And I don't think schools necessarily have put that pressure on parents in the past. It's something that's naturally come to pass based on our society and our cell phone use. But moving forward, when we do use cell phones in school and you're asking them to bring them for an educational device, that cell phone almost needs to for sure have data for it to work in a way that would give them access to the internet in a meaningful way in a classroom setting. And I don't think that's something that we should be putting on. So for that reason, I'm still in favor, and I do feel very strongly that cell phones don't belong in our classroom. I do feel like with this going into place, we will immediately be advocating to the government to provide adequate technology and dollars for technology in our schools so that our students can be using them and having access to them. We for sure don't have enough, but I think that that's the path to go rather than keeping them in the classroom.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Trustee Toon?
Yeah, I would just reiterate our calling the question on the amendment. I think we're having a great discussion, but it's a lot broader than the amendment, and just ask to speak to the full motion after the question's been called on the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Toon. Trustee Toon has called the question on the amendment.
Can I call for a point of clarification?
Yes.
Thank you. So if you can just clarify for me, are we taking out cell phone use at all? for high school students because they're still going to have it in the classroom if they can go to their lockers to get it. What we're debating is where it's going to be stored.
Yes,
My point of clarification is,
yes.
okay, that's confusing to me. Thank you.
There, it's just, so we have taken out, so it says here, students shall not be in possession of their personal mobile devices during class time and shall store a personal mobile devices in the locker unless limited use is required for.
Okay, so they can still use them in classrooms. It's just about where they get
Yes,
them from.
yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, Nikki brought it up so that we can really see that. And so I just, for the point of clarification, I just want to make sure that I have that right and that 4.1 and 3.1 will mirror each other. So everybody's clear on that? So Trustee Toon, as the mover of the amendment, did you want to close on it?
Nope, I don't think so, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we are, if everybody's clear, just take a moment, make sure that you're understanding it completely on what we're voting on. I'm going to call for any, Brad, can you just lower your hand? Sorry, just so I can make sure that you're not opposed. Thank you. So I'm just, again, calling the question. Any opposed? So we have one opposed, Trustee Charchin, and the rest all in favor. So it is carried. Oh, Trustee Yegus, were you opposed? Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, wasn't able to push my button fast enough.
So 2 opposed, Trustee Yegus, and then the rest is in favor. So that is carried. All right, so now we're just back to, yeah, Trustee Poitras.
So just out of clarification, so that's now how it reads in 3.1 and 4.1. Is that the full amendment? Because until I saw it, I didn't know it said 4 and then the colons there. So I thought it just said unless required, period. So unless we are going to right now write what that 4 is, I would make an amendment for there to be a period after required and have that be the end of it.
So there is a 4.11 that goes after that. It's a diagnosed health or medical
those
reason.
points. Sorry. After it went down, I was like, what is it? Why does it read like that?
So
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, then I'm
You're
good.
okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it does go down for a couple things for health reasons and for educational support as approved. So, okay.
And Trustee Charchin, I wanted to apologize. I was speaking further to the amendment, which is why you felt confused on, aren't we just talking about where to store it? And that was definitely my inappropriate debate that I forgot we were just on the amendment. So I apologize for that.
Thank you all. So now we're just back to the motion now that includes the amendment that the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of Board Policy 24, Personal Mobile Devices and Social Media in Schools as amended. Okay, now I just got to switch over here. Hold on, bear with me. To change 4.1, shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during class time and shall store personal mobile devices in the locker unless limited use is required. 4, ... and to mirror 4.1 and 3.1 will be mirrored. So now that is what we're speaking to. I see Trustee Toon, your hand is up.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the great discussion on this. I know that we've all had a lot of thought on this. I agree with Trustee Poitras and Trustee Gimber. I think there is a lot of inequity that having cell phones in the classroom creates and a lot of challenges, just with even how taxing it is on the infrastructure and internet in the classroom. I've heard lots from students that they can't even get YouTube videos to load for instructional for the entire school classroom to watch because of bandwidth issues with the amount of devices on there and that's on divisional devices. So I'm in full support of this having going forward as is, but I do support no cell phones in the classroom. And I think that we'll have more discussion on this from stakeholders as this rolls out, and look forward to the discussion that comes from that.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. Trustee Long? We can't hear you, Trustee Long. I'm
definitely in full support of this policy. I believe what we're doing here is the right thing. This is much more serious than being in a classroom and saying to a student, keep your eyes on your own paper. We call that a distraction. No talking during class time. Don't turn around and look at the person behind you. Please raise your hand if you have to leave the room. This is way beyond this. The reason it's become a policy is because the research says this is an addiction. Cell phones are an addiction. And you do not put things that people are addicted to, distractions, you don't put them in situations where it's very difficult for them to not do that addiction. And that's what we're doing here. We're helping our students by removing them from a negative situation. I fully support it.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Seguin?
Thanks. I wonder, based on the revision here, if I could ask Nikki to pull up something that I was working on as you were talking. I think that there are a couple of other things that we could clean up potentially. And so one is 3.2. But once we get specific about 3.1, about them being stored in their locker, I'm not sure if 3.2 is necessary. And same thing goes with 4.2. I think 3.2 and 4.2 could probably be removed. And then 4.3, I think would fit better now up in 4.1.3. So I sent this to Nikki, and if I could ask her to pull it up, then you could look at it and maybe it would be more clear. Nikki, did you get that email, and could you pull up that revision?
Yeah, it's just going to take me one moment, please. Thanks.
Okay. I guess one thing I had put in Greg's wording, though, so I said in their locker, but you may not want it to be in their locker. You may want it to read in the locker. So just know that when she pulls that up, it might be a slight change from what you had just passed. So we can edit that for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. Just looking that over quickly, that absolutely makes complete sense. And so I appreciate you reading that further down and recognizing that.
Okay, so Nikki, if you go to 3.2 or 3.2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just removing that piece, and then 4.1.3. What I did was I took 4.3. It didn't read properly anyway because it said unless limited in 4.1 at the end. It says unless limited use is required for, and then it lists 4.11, 4.12. But 4.1 or 4.3 should really fall under there too. Unless limited use is required for a specific educational task or purpose when given permission by the teacher. That's the only difference in the 10 to 12. And then I've removed 4.2 as well in this version. So just some thoughts based on the conversation. I think it flows better. I think it reads better. It's a lot more clear once you've made those changes. And then I am suggesting making this other one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. All right. So there's been a recommendation from Mr. Seguin to edit this just a little bit further. So just help me out here, board. Do we need a motion to support that from Mr. Seguin? And if we do, could somebody just make that motion? Trustee Toon, I see your hand up.
Yeah, we'd need somebody to move that amendment, and yeah, I would be willing to make that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. Okay, so we have a recommendation from Mr. Seguin on the floor that Trustee Toon has supported, and it is making that amendment. Is there any other comments around that now that there's the amendment on the floor? Trustee Charchin.
I'm just going back to what Mr. Seguin said about using the word there. I'm wondering with the word there, if it could be misconstrued by putting it in somebody else's locker. It's not in their locker. So I wonder if the would be better, or any locker or something to that effect.
Any other questions or comments around that? Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, I would support that. I happen to know that my grade 11 and his 3 friends shared one locker last year. So I think saying the locker is fine.
The locker or a locker?
Sure. In a locker.
A locker, yeah. Mr. Seguin?
I'm just wondering about, and I don't know how many, I don't know how many kindergarten, grade 1, 2 kids have cell phones, but I'm not sure all of them have lockers.
Right.
Chair?
Yes, Trustee Poitras, sorry.
Yeah, in my opinion, if I read it and it's like, well, you have to store it in your locker, but you don't have a locker, then you shouldn't have your cell phone there. If I had a grade 3 student or 4 student or kindergarten student who was taking a cell phone to class and there is no locker and that is the policy, then I would reach out to the teacher or to the principal and say, my student will be bringing a cell phone for this purpose. It's supposed to be stored in a locker. Can you please let me know where you would like it to be stored? I feel like I would have a pretty specific reason why they would be bringing it, and I would know that it's not going to be on their person. So then can it please be stored in the teacher's desk or at the office? Because I really think that it's pretty clear that it needs to be stored in the locker. And if, say, my child decides I don't use my locker, I've never used it, so I've never used my locker, I gave my lock back, I can't store it in my locker, well, then it can't be on school property. You either need to store it in the locker that you are provided. If you weren't provided, then you're going to need to make arrangements with your teacher or principal. I think that, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that if it needs to be stored in a locker, and if you don't have a locker, then it can't be in the school unless you've made other arrangements.
Trustee Charchin?
Our grandson, who just finished grade 2, talked about a number of his classmates who carry cell phone on a regular basis. So I'm wondering if that might be a bit of a hassle for a teacher. Could that fit under the school plan where in Div 1 or whatever grade it is, those lower grades, that the school plan would designate where those cell phones would be kept if those children are bringing?
Thank you, Trustee Charchin. So I guess I just need a consensus from the board as to how we want that to read in their locker, in our locker, in that 4.1. As we got the amendments on the floor. Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I was making an amendment to the amendment to say a locker.
A locker, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. All right, so we're just speaking
Yeah.
to just that amendment now that Trustee Poitras has put on there, that it will read in a locker. Trustee Toon?
Sorry. Yeah. No, can we call the question on that one? I think there wasn't
Yes.
any opposition to that one. Thanks.
Thank you. Question has been called, so it'll read in a locker. Just make sure everybody's clear on that. Any opposed? Carried. Goes back to the main motion that Trustee Toon had made with the recommendations from Mr. Seguin. If there's any clarity that is needed, please speak now. If not, we will move forward with this. Trustee Charchin.
Can I make an amendment to that?
Yep.
Okay, so 4.1 shall not be in possession. Oh, that's 10 to 12. Okay. I'm thinking about the K to threes or students who do not have a locker. So I don't know where that would be. Maybe you could, Madam Chair, tell me where that would.
Nikki, if you could scroll down to 3 or scroll up to 3, whatever, the K to 9, and let's see where that reads in there. So shall not be in possession of personal mobile devices during the day and must store personal mobile devices in their locker unless limited use is required for. There's nothing stating in here that if they don't have a locker.
So can I make an amendment to that then?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3.1 shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal devices in, somebody will have to help me with the wording here, in a locker unless they don't have a locker, and then it would fall to the school plan, something to that.
What about if it read in a locker or designated area unless limited use is required for?
Do we want to say designated area as outlined in a school plan?
Yeah, you could say that. Trustee Poitras has her hand up. Maybe she had some wordsmithing there. And then I see.
I think it's important. I think it's important to make sure that it's where. So I would say in a locker, period, where a locker is not available, refer to the school plan. Because I think if you just say in a locker or designated area, then that totally negates what we just did in removing the pouches, blah, blah, blah. So I would say in a locker, period, where a locker has not been provided or where a locker is not available, students will refer to the school plan.
Period. Yes, I like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Toon. Oh, did you put your hand down or?
Yeah, I put my hand on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the amendment on the floor is for the 3.1. Shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal mobile devices in a locker, period. Where a locker is not available, students will refer to the school plan. Correct?
Would we say storage refers to the school plan? The storage of the device refers to the school plan?
I think we're already talking about the device up above.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that Trustee Poitras, that was the wording that was presented. I make sure that was correct. Just where a locker is not available, students will refer to the school plan. Okay. So Mr. Seguin.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep the flow of that sentence because it leads into 3.11 and 3.12 as well. I guess what I'm wondering is, if I remember what I was thinking, shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal mobile devices preferably in a locker or according to the school plan, unless limited use is required for. I don't know. I just worry if you put a period there and then have a complete other sentence, how are you going to tie back in unless limited uses for 3.11 and 3.12?
Okay, so just a recommendation from Mr. Seguin was that maybe it should read, shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the day and must store the personal mobile devices preferably in a locker or according to the school.
Or where a locker is unavailable.
How about in a locker where available or according to school plan when not available, unless limited use is required for. So in a locker where available or according to school plan where not available. Nikki, I'm trying to say it more than once, nice and slow for you. So So must be stored in a locker where available or according to the school plan where not available. Comma, unless limited use is required for. Okay, take over there, but I just sounded more flowy.
Okay, so we have trustee Toon with his hand up and then trustee Long.
Yeah, I appreciate what the intent is, but I don't think we need any of this. The school can define what a locker is if they don't have traditional lockers where every student has one, and we've kind of moved past that even. You can designate what the locker is. If it's a drawer in an office, if it's a drawer in the teacher's desk, or whatever it has, that can be defined in under the school plan. That I don't think we need to try and wordsmith this out. I would just not include it at all, and it can be in the admin procedure what the definition of a locker is if there isn't the traditional locker. Like I don't think it's our role to find alternative spots or to fully flesh this out, and we'll get feedback on all this in the subsequent readings.
Thank you, trustee Toon. Trustee Long.
Yeah, the problem with that is that 7, 8s, and 9s usually have a locker. And so I think locker has to stay in there. Otherwise, we're back to pouches in the classroom or in your school bags. 7, 8, 9s do have lockers. I would take out where not available. So shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal devices in a locker where available, which I agree makes sense, or according to the school plan. You don't need the where not available. That's too wordy. Just according to the school plan. But I like to leave the lockers in there because most of our 7, 8, 9s will have a locker. Take it out and we just open up another can of worms for the 7, 8, 9s.
Thank you, trustee Long. Trustee Yegas.
I agree with trustee Toon. I think if you say a locker, I mean, they could put something into the, I'm talking about K to 9 here. I think they could put it in an office or something like that and just lock it up. I don't think we need to go changing all of this because all you're doing is making it a little more difficult for it to read. If you say a locker, they could find something to lock it up in.
Thank you, trustee Yegas. Trustee Tarchin.
I think a locker has a pretty specific context in the school culture, and I would read it as a locker in a hallway that is assigned to a student, and I would suggest we pick a different word than a locker, a storage place, or something, if we are opening up the definition of a locker.
Thank you, trustee Tarchin. All right, we're just speaking to the amendment, which if there's seeking any more clarity or questions, if not, then we'll move forward. Right, so we are speaking to shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal mobile devices in a locker where available or according to the school plan, unless limited use is required for.
Chair?
Yes.
Is this an amendment to the amendment? So the original amendment was a recommendation from Mr. Seguin that was
Yes,
brought
this is
forward by
Kathy's
Toon, and
amendment.
this is an amendment to that amendment.
This
Okay,
is-
perfect. Thank
yeah.
you. Just for
Trustee
clarity.
Tarchin's amendment. Yeah, so we're just speaking to that amendment to the amendment. Sorry, I should have said amendment to the amendment. Yes, thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands. We are just speaking to the amendment to the amendment. I'm going to ask for any opposed. Trustee Toon and trustee Yegas are opposed, so it is carried. Now we are back to the motion.
We're still need to vote on the amendment that
Yes, sorry,
Foundation, yeah, okay.
the amendment, sorry, not the motion. There's a lot going on here today, and it's not the same without having my screen in front of me. Okay, Nikki, sorry, can you please bring that back up again so I could just read it all as one now because the amendment's been added into it?
Like the original amendment, or you want the, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
fine.
we have the amendment to the amendment was voted in, so now we're just back to that now.
Okay, just one moment, please.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
I believe this is the one that we're back to, just the original one that Mr. Seguin and then board approved the changes as presented.
Yeah, can you just scroll down to that 3.1 there, just so everybody can just make sure they can read it over and that the amendment to this was added in? Unless, is everybody clear on it? I could, do you need to see it again? Everybody's okay? Thumbs up?
I'd like to see it again, please.
Okay, so I just need that 3.1, Nikki, sorry. So the recommendation from Mr. Seguin that the Board of Trustees approve the changes, and then it's what is now going to be added into that. Okay, so the recommendations from Mr. Seguin and the amendment shall not be in possession of a personal mobile device during the school day and must store personal mobile devices in a locker where available or according to the school plan, unless limited use is required for. So that is the motion we are voting on. Trustee Toon has made that. Is there any other clarity seeking questions that is needed? If not, we'll move forward. Trustee Toon is the mover of the motion. Would you like to close?
No, thank you.
All right, so we have that motion on the floor. I will again ask for any opposed. Seeing none, carried. All right. So now we are so the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the first reading of the Board Policy 24 personal mobile devices in social media in schools as amended. The main mover of this whole motion was Trustee Poitras. Would you like to close on it?
Yeah, thank you. I think that we've had some great conversation here today, and I think that this is indicative of what we will see when we take it out to administrators, staff, and parents as well. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. What I'm most looking forward to is the benefits that I know without a doubt we are going to see for our students' mental health, for their academic success. And I'm so proud of this board for, having this motion coming into effect before we even had the ministerial order. And we are being as proactive with this as possible. So I appreciate the conversation, and I hope that
Trustee Long.
Trustee Long.
Speaking.
Trustee Long, you're unmuted. Could you, there we go. Thanks. Sorry, go ahead, finish up there,
That's
Trustee.
okay. I know he was waiting for a medical call. Anyways, I look forward to the continued conversation, and I would ask for a recorded vote for this motion, this first reading.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Sorry, Trustee Toon, did you have a clarifying question or? Sorry, Trustee Toon, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm good now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you, everyone, so very much for coming here today to have this very special meeting. And I really appreciate everyone's support in this. I feel like this is such a great step moving forward in our division, and I really appreciate everyone's passion around this. And so I am now going to call the question. Again, I'm going to ask for any opposed, and a recorded vote has been asked for. So any opposed? Trustee Yegus was opposed. Everybody else is in favor. We'll just give, Nikki, do you need a minute there, or are you okay?
I'm okay, thank you.
All right, perfect. All right, everybody, that comes to the end of our agenda. Thank you again for all your time this morning. Again, not realizing it was a Friday of a long weekend, and so I apologize, and I'm super glad you were able to take time out of your morning. So we are moving on to E, our adjournment. The recommendation that the Board of Trustees vote in favor of the meeting being adjourned. Can I get someone to please make that motion? Trustee Charchin? All right, the adjournment is at what time is it? 10:12. Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.